Hi, my name is Rick Mannon, and I'm an inductee into the Brantford Area Sports Hall of Recognition, and I'm honored today to be interviewing Dan Mandich for the sport of hockey. At the age of 7, Dan learned to skate, and by 10, he was playing with the Nadrofsky Steelers. It was the first Brantford team to win the All-Ontario Championship. At 17, he began playing with the Windsor Spitfires, but was injured during the season and finished the year with the Windsor Royals, winning the Southwestern Ontario Championship and All-Ontario runner-up. The next year, Mandich received a scholarship to play at The Ohio State University, where he was selected as the Central Collegiate Hockey Association First Team All-Star and Ohio State's All-Century team. Between 1982 and 1986, he played with the Minnesota North Stars until a career-ending injury. So Dan, what drew you into your sport?
I guess just being in Brantford, growing up in Brantford, all the kids in my neighborhood played hockey, it seemed, and when I went to the park, you know, the kids were playing hockey, and I had older cousins, Dave Grundy, Paul Grundy, that played some hockey. In fact, the first pair of skates I had were theirs, and you'd go and watch them play. So it's just a neighborhood thing, you know, and then, you know, hockey night in Canada as a kid growing up, watching that, you know, a little bit Wednesdays and Saturday nights. And so I think, you know, just being in Brantford, a lot of the young people playing hockey at that time. And again, Canada's tradition with hockey night in Canada was the other part, I guess.
Good. So you started with hand-me-down skates. That's always an important part to remember, I think.
Right. Well, you never know if you're going to like it or not, right?
Yeah.
And they were so big that we had to put socks in the toe and, you know, wear 2 or 3 pairs of socks. But I spent more time on my ankles than on the blades back then. You know.
Good. Do you have any mentors that have had an impact on your life, sport, or career?
I think when I was very little, there was my uncle played some hockey, and then his son Dave Grundy played some hockey, and I remember that and going to his games when I was a young boy, and then just the neighborhood. When you're little, you're just looking at the older players and watching them play. And then, you know, my fascination with the NHL and Gordie Howe. My dad was a huge fan of Gordie Howe. My dad never played hockey, but he really appreciated the game and, you know, loved Gordie Howe and, you know, watching him as a kid. And I was automatically a Red Wing fan. And so I think those would be more my mentors when I was younger, a younger player. And then as I got older, Brantford had some great hockey talent. I remember going and watched Walter coach the junior, I think it was C team or whatever, and my cousin Dave Grundy was on that team, but Dougie Jarvis was there and Stan Jonathan, and one of the Hickey boys, I think it was Greg Hickey, and, you know, loaded team, and I forget their name, but maybe Waterford or whatever, they're Brantford boys though, and watching those guys play, and it was fun. Then as I got a little bit older, you know, you always aspire to the better players in the league. Bobby Orr, watching people like that play, and, you know, and the qualities that they would bring to the game. And so I think as a whole, that would be the group of people or the greatest influence I had, or they had on my life as a player playing hockey in Brantford.
Great. What are some of the highlights of your career?
Some of the highlights, you know, when you look back in this last month or so after I was, I really appreciate the fact that I got inducted in here, because you actually start looking back at your career a little bit more in depth than I hadn't done in a long time. And you look back at some of the more meaningful times. One was when I finally made a so-called, they called them all-star teams back then, but it was, I guess, AAA today. And, for Brantford, I played for the Nadrofsky Steelers, and that was something. And Walter Gretzky was the coach, and that's where I made a lot of great friendships that are still great friends today. And that was kind of a highlight looking back. And then I went to a Brantford team was put together to play over in Europe in our midget year of hockey. I think it was like 15 or 16, and we went over to Finland and Russia, and that was a great experience. And we went over, my mom was able to come, so some of the parents were able to come with you. Playing junior hockey, I wasn't drafted, so actually trying out and making a major junior team. was a thrill. And some of my lowlights in hockey became highlights later when I look in retrospect, because I got hurt playing that season. And if I hadn't been hurt and I played over 20 games, I wouldn't be able to go and wasn't able to play college back then. And but because I got hurt within that 20-game period of time, and then back then the surgeries weren't as good, and I had to wait for a brace and everything, so I missed the rest of that season. Practiced with the team a bit, but didn't play. And it was interesting that that problem or the issue that came up became a positive later on, because I ended up playing at Ohio State, and that was a huge highlight for me to be able to play college hockey, not knowing it at the time. And then from college hockey, playing in the NHL for the first time was a great thrill. I scored my first NHL goal against my best friend growing up, and and Greg Steffen. We played years and years of hockey together, and that was a highlight. Playing against Wayne and other guys that you grow up with playing against, and Joel Quinville at Windsor, he was my partner for a while in Windsor, and then the camaraderie you have, and after the game, and then playing in Maple Leaf Gardens for the first time, and things like that. It was always a highlight. The Montreal Forum, and just kids, it's a dream, right? That when you're a kid, and then the dream becomes a reality, and it's just pinch me kind of thing. And then when I look back, pretty much every day, when you're playing hockey in the NHL, it's kind of like a highlight, I think. At least that's the way I look at it, looking back.
How has hockey impacted your life?
I think, hockey impacting my life, well, what I do today, if I go backwards from where I am today, I think the lessons that you learn, like you talk about dealing with disappointment, you realize that there's always another day, and really it's not how you deal with or it's not about the disappointment or the defeat. It's really how you deal with the disappointment and defeat that really, controls your outcome later in life. And I think hockey was able to teach me that a little bit. I think it also taught me some perseverance. Anytime any athlete that's out there knows that you have to have a work ethic. The stronger your work ethic usually equates to a higher level of performance, discipline, those types of things that were able to take through and make me successful in what I do today. So I think hockey was very good to me. Like I said, the people that I've been able to associate with. I think when I look at all sports, not just hockey, but I played baseball here in Brantford, and I think you have to learn how to deal with some of the good things too. You can get a big head at times. You start reading articles about how great you are, and it's like, well, you have to deal with that aspect of it too. And I think that's important, because I think a lot of people fail to deal with success as well as they should, maybe. So that was one of the things too, because we had successful teams. When I was a little guy, like the Nadrofsky Steelers team, that was the first team in Brantford to win all Ontario. At the time you think, oh, okay, great, I just want to play another game, right? But it's like, no, you've won, and you got to the peak, and you don't really understand it till you're later on when you're actually trying to achieve it, and it's kind of funny, but as you deal with that, or you win an MVP of a tournament or whatever it is, and championships, just dealing with success is also a great thing that you learn through sports, and I learned through hockey because I had also success. So.
Great. What does it mean to be inducted into the Sports Hall?
Well, for me, it's a great honor. I look back at some of the guys that have been. I just walked through the hall here today, and for the first time, and it's quite a history. Quite a lot of these guys I know, and I know their stories, and it's fun to actually be inducted with them, because it is a great honor to be thought of, on that same level. We have some phenomenal athletes here, you included, in Brantford, and it's amazing. Actually, when you think about it, Brantford being a small town in my mind, and it's it's a bigger city today, but growing up, it's amazing the number of great athletes that have came out of here, you know, and not just in hockey, but in all facets. So it's a great honor to be inducted here in the hall.
Great. What advice would you share with a young aspiring athlete?
You know, if I would go with your passions. You know, if you don't do something because someone tells you to. You know, your dad played hockey, so play hockey. You know, you might want to get into lacrosse, or you might want to get into track, or whatever it is, because I believe whatever you love to do or you're passionate about doing, you'll probably be good at. If it's art or music, whatever it may be. And I think, you know, as far as an athlete goes, find that passion, and then and be honest with yourself and truthful, and then also on that sort, be good to yourself, you know, and give yourself an opportunity. If you really want to succeed at something, you can't just wish it. You know, you have to do something about it. I always told my kids that you can have a plan, you have a goal, you set those goals up, but the hardest part now is to execute those goals on a day-to-day fashion, and because it just won't happen just because you wish it or want it. So I think for young people is follow their passion, believe in yourself, be positive, and make a plan and execute.
That's a good message. Do you have any other thoughts, Dan, that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm going to talk about it a little bit tonight here, but you know, people, you know, in sports in general, don't get to where they are by themselves. You know, no one's in a vacuum. All your achievements are usually through different people that have helped you along the way, and I'm one of those people. So I'm very thankful that I had certain people that came in to my life at different stages of my life at different times, and one of the thoughts I would have is that at the time, I wish I would have been a little more thankful at the time and recognize those people. You know, you always thank your coach at the end of the season or whatever, but there are other people outside of coaches too. But you know, a lot of these coaches give their time and efforts. The volunteers, you know, you look around and you think of all the people that volunteer for youth sports to make it happen. This whole facility, this day for me, wouldn't be here without volunteers. And so I think as an athlete, I think you realize, especially as you get older or as you get in the midst of it, and as you maybe get to certain and attain certain goals or things, you start to realize, hey, there's a lot of people involved. This isn't just me. There was a lot of people that were involved, and I'm very thankful for all those people, the city of Brantford, all the volunteers, all the coaches I've had, and the guys I got to play hockey with in this town. Because I think iron sharpens iron, and we all made each other better.